Hey guys, it's Bella and welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all having an incredible day. In today's case, we're going to be covering another Mystery Monday for my 12 days of Christmas. I'm doing a Mystery Monday every day for the next 12 days, so make sure you check back in tomorrow because there'll be another video. And let's go ahead and get into today's case. So today we're going to be talking about the Christmas Eve Massacre, or the Covina Massacre. 80-year-old Joseph Ortega and his wife, 70-year-old Alicia Ortega, who had been together for 53 years, loved Christmas. It was their favorite time of the year because of the quality time they got to spend with their family. They lived in Covina, which was a relatively quiet and safe community about 35 kilometers east of LA. And on Christmas Eve of 2008, they invited their 5 now adult children, James, Charles, Letitia, Alicia, and Sylvia, and their children's families to their house to celebrate and spend some time together. There ended up being about 25 to 30 people there. They had a lovely dinner. Everyone was having a really nice time, enjoying each other's companies. And then after dinner, the Ortegas and their 5 children decided to play a game of Texas Hold'em in the dining room. And meanwhile, the kids and the grandkids were all hanging out outside in the backyard next to the pool or playing some video games. There was also another one of the grandchildren, 17-year-old Michael, who was upstairs on a computer by himself. By around 11:30 p.m, most of the adults were gathered towards the front of the house because it was getting late, the night was wrapping up, they were all, just having a chat before getting ready to leave. And then there was a knock at the door. 8-year-old Katrina Yusuflosky, the daughter of Letitia, who was one of the 5 adult siblings, ran to answer the door and was greeted by a man in a Santa costume holding a wrapped gift. Obviously, she was super excited. It was 11:30 p.m. on Christmas Eve, and there was this Santa at the door with a present, and so she was yelling, "Santa Claus, Santa Claus," before the man in the Santa costume shot her in the face. Turns out, inside the gift-wrapped package the man was holding was a homemade flamethrower, and in his other hand was a semi-automatic rifle. The man was also in possession of 3 other 9mm handguns. As soon as the first shots were fired, most of the adults began to flee and picked up their children and fled out to the front of the house with their children. Joseph and Alicia Ortega and their 3 daughters, Alicia, Sylvia, and Letitia, as well as their daughter-in-law, Teresa, immediately tried to hide from the gunman under the dining table, but unfortunately it was no use as the man had begun to fire his gun throughout the house. James Ortega was the second person to be shot after 8-year-old Katrina, and as he was, his brother Charles recognized the gunman and shouted, "It's Bruce," before also being shot. Despite both having been shot, James and Charles both tried to get up and restrain the gunman, but they were unable to. Joseph and Alicia and 2 of their daughters, Sylvia and Alicia, were also then shot and killed. The only one of their daughters who survived was Letitia, who was the mother of 8-year-old Katrina, who opened the door. After the man finished shooting, he unwrapped the gift that he had been carrying to unveil the flamethrower, and he used this homemade flamethrower to douse the entire house in gasoline. And then there was like 2 tanks in the house, which he used as like a device to fuse together into this device that would explode and quickly engulf the whole house in fire. Of course, with the number of people at the house at the time and the nature of the explosion and the fire, there were multiple 911 calls made. One neighbor called early on after hearing gunshots, another neighbor called to report the blaze, and then the remaining daughter, Letitia, the only daughter who survived, called 911 and was absolutely hysterical, as I'm sure you can imagine.
Hello?
Hi.
Please come immediately.
Who's in your house?
Immediately.
Ma'am, is the guy in your house right now?
We're having 2 houses down on the Google Site.
Okay. Ma'am, hold on. Is he at your house?
Yes, he's got this shooting.
The fire got up to 12 to 15 meters high and took 80 firefighters an hour and a half to extinguish. Most of the 25 to 30 guests managed to escape, including pretty much all of the children. And, detectives think that this is because they were mostly at the back of the house, playing video games, hanging out in the backyard, so they weren't really where the shots were being fired. And then as the shots were being fired, all of the parents knew what was going on and grabbed their children and escaped from the house. 3 people were wounded, including 8-year-old Katrina, who opened the door, who was shot in the face. Luckily, the bullet only grazed her cheek and jaw, and she did need surgery, but she did manage to make a full recovery. A 16-year-old girl that was at the house was injured after having been shot in the back, and a 20-year-old woman at the house was also injured after she broke her ankle trying to jump out of the second-story window. 9 people died, and due to the intensity of the fire, these 9 victims could only be identified using dental and medical records. The 9 victims who died as a result of the attack were host 80-year-old Joseph Ortega, who died of multiple gunshot wounds, his wife, 70-year-old Alicia Ortega, who died of a gunshot wound to the abdomen. 4 of their 5 children died: Charles, James, Alicia, and Sylvia, due to both gunshot wounds and the fire. Alicia's son Michael died alone upstairs, and it's believed that he died due to the explosion of the 2 tanks that were used to set the house on fire. Charles's wife Cherry and James's wife Teresa also died in the fire. Upon arrival, police immediately started to question the survivors to figure out who would have done this, why would anyone have wanted to do such a thing, and if they recognized the attacker. Most of the survivors actually did recognize the shooter, including the one surviving Ortega sister, Letitia, who said that she was certain it was her sister Sylvia's ex-husband, Bruce Pardo. One of the Ortega's neighbors also said that she and her husband had seen a car leaving their cul-de-sac at around 11:45 p.m, so police immediately put an APB out on the car and started the hunt for Bruce Pardo. Meanwhile, police in Sylmar, which was about 60 kilometers away from Covina, received a call from a man named Brad Pardo. He had just returned home himself from a Christmas party to find his brother, Bruce Pardo, lying dead in a pool of blood. A bullet hole was found in the ceiling, and the Los Angeles County Coroner's Lieutenant, Fred Corral, said that there was an exit wound at the top of Bruce's head, which suggested that he had placed the gun in his mouth before pulling the trigger. He was found with a 9mm gun in his hand, which was the gun that he used to commit suicide. The other 2 9mm handguns that were in his possession were also found, one on his lap and one on the floor next to him. Police found at Bruce's house 4 13-round capacity handguns as well as 200 rounds of ammunition. They also found 5 boxes of ammunition for semi-automatic handguns, 2 shotguns, and a container of high-octane gas. It is believed, however, that committing suicide was not Bruce's original plan. Initially, it was believed that he actually planned to flee to Canada because he had a ticket for an Air Canada flight. On further investigation, though, it was found that this flight was actually a flight from LA to Illinois. He had a friend in Illinois who he had visited in October of 2008, and he contacted this friend a few days before the massacre, saying that he was planning to visit. Police did believe that he may have done this to throw off the investigation. Maybe he hadn't planned the massacre so far in advance, or maybe he had the intention to flee but couldn't. He suffered both 2nd and 3rd degree burns from the explosion and subsequent fire, and the burns were so bad that some of the Santa costume actually melted into his skin. It's possible that it was due to these injuries that he decided it wasn't possible for him to make this LA to Illinois flight. Instead, what happened was he left the property after setting it ablaze, and he changed his clothes as best he could despite some of the Santa costume being literally melted into his skin. He then got in his Dodge Caliber rental car and drove to his brother's house, where he committed suicide while his brother was out. He was found with $17,000 in cash cling wrapped to his leg inside a girdle, which seems to either support the theory that he was going to flee to Illinois, or that he had booked the flight to throw police off and then was going to flee with all of this money, because obviously you need money to flee and hide and evade police, that sort of deal. I also found that a toxicology report found found that his blood and urine tested positive for cocaine, which I definitely think was like used to like amp him up to go and commit the massacre. Like he did a line and was like, all right, let's do this thing. I definitely don't think it was like a spur of the moment thing. Like he did a line and then was like, okay, I'm gonna go and commit a massacre. Like this was 100% pre-planned, purely based on like, you know, all of the guns and ammunitions that were found in his house, found in his body, the homemade flamethrower, and the 2 tanks that he fused together to make the explosion to set the whole house on fire. Like he must have known the outlay of the house. He must have already thought about the fact that he was gonna get these 2 tanks and fuse them together and make this big explosion. How much planning and how long he planned to do this for, I don't know. But I mean, there's a bit of an inkling. We'll get into that a bit later. His rental car was found parked 1 block from his brother's house, and inside the car they found his Santa suit, which had been rigged with gunpowder, so if anyone tried to touch it or move it, the car might explode. Police treated the contents of the car as a threat, and they called the bomb squad, who I found some differing reports as to what happened with the bomb squad. Some said that the bomb squad actually threw an incendiary device in themselves to explode it and get rid of the threat, and then there were also some reports saying that when trying to defuse the situation, the car set on fire. Bruce Pardo was born on the 23rd of March in 1963 in Los Angeles, California. He attended John H. Francis Polytechnic High School in Sun Valley, LA, and graduated and went on to attend the California State University in Northbridge. After this, he went on to work at Jet Propulsion Laboratory in LA in Flint Ridge, before eventually getting a job as an electrical engineer in ITT Electronic Systems. In 2004, Bruce met Sylvia Ortega, and the couple married a couple of years later in 2006 in January, and their marriage and their future was looking super bright at the time. They had a $500,000 home on a quiet cul-de-sac in Montrose. The house was located just 25 kilometers from the Redeemer Catholic Church, where Bruce volunteered as an usher at the children's mass. They owned a beautiful dog together named Saki. Sylvia brought about $31,000 a year to the marriage from her job at a flower breeding company in El Monte, and 3 children, including a 5-year-old daughter who Bruce apparently was really close to, and she also had 2 other children from a previous marriage, so 3 in total. Bruce was making around $122,000 at the time at his job at ITT, and the couple managed to save up about $88,000 together in just 2 years as, I don't know, like a backup fund. I'm not really sure what they were saving for. However, in 2007, everything seemed to start going downhill for Bruce. By December of 2007, Sylvia was sleeping in a different room at the house. She was spending weekends with her parents, and eventually she filed for divorce for a few reasons. Bruce wasn't a great guy, as I'm sure you can tell. So first of all, Bruce refused to open a joint account with Sylvia, despite the fact that they were married and they were saving $88,000 together, and he also refused to take any part in caring for her children. He didn't want any of his money to go towards her children at all, especially considering he claimed that he came to the marriage with 0 children of his own. To add insult to injury though, Sylvia actually found out that Bruce did have a child. He had a son named Matthew with his previous wife. To add insult to injury though, Sylvia actually found out that Bruce did have a child. He had a son named Matthew with his previous wife. Not only like was it the fact that he had a son, which wouldn't have been a big deal, but it was the fact that he like lied and said he had no children going into the relationship. He had not seen Matthew in years. He wanted nothing to do with him, but he still claimed him as a dependent for tax purposes. In 2001, when Elena and Bruce were still together and their son Matthew was just 13 months old, Elena left Matthew and Bruce home alone to just go and do some grocery shopping at their Woodland Hills home, and you know, shouldn't be an issue, right? Well, somehow Matthew ended up in the pool. Eventually, Bruce found him lying face down in the pool, unconscious, and when Elena got home, Bruce was just standing there holding Matthew like he was frozen. He wasn't doing anything, he was just standing there. Elena immediately rushed Matthew to the nearby hospital where paramedics were able to resuscitate him. He was was then later airlifted to the Children's Hospital in Los Angeles, which is a world-renowned trauma center that specializes in severe pediatric care. Unfortunately, Matthew was left with severe brain injuries and would have to spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair and would need round-the-clock care. Less than 6 months later, Elena and Bruce ended their marriage, and Bruce just started acting like they didn't exist. He stopped visiting, he wouldn't put any of his money towards his son's care at all, nothing. Eventually, Matthew's care within the first year ended up reaching $340,000, and so Elena ended up suing Bruce. She was awarded his $100,000 homeowner's insurance, and also a trust was set up for $240 per month, which is nothing, to go towards Matthew's care every month for the rest of Matthew's life. Once the settlement was released in August of 2002, Bruce stopped all contact with Elena and Matthew and never saw them or spoke to them again. Bruce's mother, however, maintained regular contact with Elena and her grandson, and she was actually the one who ended up telling Sylvia about Matthew. So Sylvia filed court papers asking for attorney's fees and $3,166 in monthly spousal support. She also claimed that Bruce had drawn down their savings of $88,000 to just $17,000 in 2 months. So he had taken out $71,000 in just 2 months and had been transferring funds to a private account. She was awarded these payments in June of 2008. However, 1 month later in July, Bruce lost his job at ITT for billing false hours and was soon drowning in debt trying to find a new job. He complained in a court filing that he had monthly expenses of $8,900 and a monthly deficit of $2,678. He also said he had $31,000 in credit card debt and $2,700 monthly mortgage payments. He claims he didn't receive a severance package because why would you? You were fired for billing false hours. So he wasn't receiving any income, and he was also denied unemployment benefits. The courts then lowered his payments to Sylvia to $1,785, as well as another $3,500 payment for missing past payments. When the case settled just 1 week before the massacre, I think the courts ended up waiving all of those fees and awarding the house to Bruce. He was, however, ordered to pay her a $10,000 payment. He had to give her back the diamond wedding ring he had given her, which I guess he had taken back, and now he had to give it back to her, and it was quite an expensive ring and worth quite a lot of money. And she was also awarded the family dog Saki. Bruce was super pissed off because he claimed that while he had to pay her this money and give her the diamond ring, that she didn't have any expenses, really, because she was living in her parents' house, she wasn't paying rent, but she was buying a luxury car, she was going to Vegas all the time to gamble, she was buying luxury meals, she was getting golf lessons, massages, shopping, and he was really annoyed about it. So it's believed that all of the proceedings, the fact that he was struggling financially, is the reason that he decided to carry out this massacre. After the massacre took place, Letitia, the only surviving sibling, started a blog called Letitia's Hope, where she writes about her experiences and stories of love, healing, and family, and tries to help others by giving them hope. Her daughter Katrina, the 8-year-old that was shot in the face when opening the door, now advocates for those who have been affected by gun violence. And that is all of the information that I have on this case. Honestly, what a horrible thing to happen when you're spending a Christmas Eve dinner with family, their favorite time of the year, spending quality time together, and some scorned ex who's going through his own problems decides to come and shoot the place up and then set it on fire. It's honestly so fucked up. Sorry, messed up. But that is everything I have on the case. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below, and hopefully I will see you in my next video. Bye guys.